Would you start by just going ahead and telling me your name and where you're from, and if you don't mind, also your age?
Okay. My name is King Molapo, and I'm from Johannesburg, South Africa. I was born in Soweto, which is one of the ghettos of Johannesburg, and I'm aged 35.
And can you tell me a little bit about, transfer to this side. What do you do? What kind of work do you do?
I'm a filmmaker with an experience in theater, and I've worked extensively in South Africa with the Market Theatre Laboratory, which is a little theater place that belongs to another big theater in South Africa that was working with theater as a tool for development and social change. So I've worked extensively as an actor, as a stage actor, and I also went to the Federated Union of Black Arts, where I studied dramatic arts and film. And the Federated Union of Black Arts is just one of the institutions that catered for blacks in the time of apartheid. So that's where I started learning film, and now I'm working in film full-time.
So tell me a little bit about your use of a camera. How long and in what ways have you, before September 11th ever came around, how did you usually use a video camera? What had you done with the camera?
Well, my usage of the camera begins with when I left the Market Theatre and I left stage acting, and I wanted to pursue a career in film. So that's about 1994 when I started using the camera, and when I started writing for screen and working in film. So I've always really used the camera to film everything and anything that was of my interest, and I've always used the camera as a tool also to be my third eye in looking and making what would I say, observations about my surroundings. So this is how I use the camera mostly. I use it in this way I'm able to look at what's going on around me, and I'm able to just make my observations and film whatever that's happening wherever I could be.
And have you focused on social issues in South Africa, or what have you done in these years using a camera, doing film work, shooting work? What kind of things have you focused on?
Yes, part of my being involved in film has always been to use film as a tool for social change, and that has been the driving force for me. Also based on my experience in theater, has been to look at what the socio-economic situations of my people in South Africa, and what better way to document that than with film. So I've always worked through film in looking at the socio-economic conditions that my people are living in. In fact, my documentary that I'm working on right now deals with socio-economic conditions in South Africa, and it also deals with the the differences that you find in the communities that live there. The socio-economic differences that you find there are very wide, and it's okay writing about that, but it's another thing seeing that on film and creating those images to drive your point. So film, I find, it's very immediate in the way it tells the story, because one is able to see exactly what the differences are.
So let's sort of work our way up to September 11th, and can you tell me how you came to the US, how you came to New York?
Well, I came to New York as an exchange. There was a group of South African artists who had come to New York before me, and who had given me some contacts to come and work in New York, because in South Africa, what happens is that there isn't a lot of the technology that America has, and digital filmmaking in South Africa is pretty new, and some people came to South Africa. A group of American artists came to work in a project there, and at the time they arrived, I was working on my film, and a couple of them saw my work and they thought that it would be great if I come to New York and finish this film. So this is how I came. A couple of Americans came to South Africa, saw what I was doing, they liked it, and they sponsored my coming to New York and my staying here. So this is how I came to New York.
When did you come, and what was it like arriving?
I arrived in New York on the 1st of April. It was overwhelming for me to see. I'd never seen anything like New York before, and it was just overpowering to see this great city. And well, I've seen most of it in the movies, and I've read a lot of stories about New York. We get a lot of your culture in my country, so much that we know so much about the States than I think most Americans know about themselves. So we read a lot, we watch a lot of American films, and we know about your culture a lot. And we try to emulate that culture also in our everyday lives. Although I'm in my growth as a filmmaker and as a cultural person, I've tried to appreciate my culture more than I appreciate other cultures. So, but nevertheless, New York had been an experience for me. When I first touched down, I thought, wow, what a great city. And I found it very oppressive at times, a few weeks after I've been here, and I found it very cold, and I found it also very overpowering and very modern, but I also found that it has a third world element with it, and that for me was surprising, because this is what you don't see on TV. This is not what you don't see that in the movies that they send there. They send movies that emulate New York as this great city that is so technologically powerful that you tend to forget that there is a third world element about New York also. You don't find that in Paris or London. There's a lot more elegance in these other cities than you find in New York. So that was one observation I made, and also that when you get into the subway, you find all these different cultures. You find one guy reading a newspaper in Chinese, one guy reading a newspaper in Arabic, and all these different languages flying about, and you don't really hear about that a lot where I come from. You don't really know about these cultures going on. You only hear about America as you know. Yeah, that's they don't tell you that. I didn't get that information when I was in South Africa, but you know, when I got here, then I started seeing other things. I started hearing even languages I never thought I could never imagine. So it was an experience for me to see it for the first time.
So it was also your first time to the United States? Can you say that?
It was also my first time coming to the United States. After reading about it so much, some of my favorite writers are Americans, and you know, we learned about the US by reading a lot and by seeing it in the movies. And yeah, it was my first time here, and I loved what I saw, and I just loved the experience.
Did you have any particular feeling about the World Trade Center towers? Had you visited? So everything before September 11th we're talking about, of course, but you know, did you not thinking about September 11th, but beforehand, had you actually taken note of them, or what did you thought of them?
Well, everybody knows about the World Trade Center, you know. Everybody, since I got to New York, everybody wanted to take me there. Wanted me to see the New York skyline from up there. And I'd always postponed it. Either I was busy doing something, or I was working on my film, or I wanted to do something else. And a couple of my friends had really wanted to take me up there and get me to see the Manhattan skyline from the World Trade Center. And I remember a Chinese friend of mine who's also an artist working and living in New York had wanted to take me there at night so I can see the skyline at night. And he said, you know, come over to my house, just walk down to my house and let's go up there and I'll show you the New York skyline. Maybe you can even film from there. And I said, yeah, we'll do it sometimes. He said, give me a call, you know, whenever you want to do it, just come over. And I was gonna go, but, you know, I didn't get to do it.
Did you spend much time looking at the New York skyline from a distance? You just arrived in April, you know, what did you felt about the skyline?
You know, one thing you hear about Johannesburg is that it's an African Manhattan, right? So automatically when I first came to New York, what I wanted to see was the Manhattan skyline. So, and through reading and through talking to people a lot of young Americans who come to my country, you know, they also say that the Manhattan skyline is the best in the world. And when I first arrived in New York, I thought, yes, I want to see this Manhattan skyline. I want to see what it looks like. I want to see if it's going to make an impression on me. Like, you know, I just want to see what it looks like. And of course, I paid attention to the Manhattan skyline when I first came. And I thought it was the best. It didn't look...
That's nice.
Yes, I know. Okay,
it didn't look...
It didn't look anything like Johannesburg, but I could see the comparison. Because in Africa, well, I guess Johannesburg is one of the biggest cities in Africa. It's one of the biggest. And the skyline there, it can hold against any in the world. But it didn't look anything like the Manhattan skyline. So I thought, wow, yes, it does look amazing. And I was struck by it for a moment. So yeah, the Manhattan skyline really did look breathtaking.
Had you had any reason like fear of heights at all about, you know, the World Trade Center? Was that one of the reasons maybe you didn't get around to going, or just curious?
No. I'm normally not afraid of heights. I'm terrified of flying though.
I understand.
Yeah, it's for me. I don't even before 9/11. I had always been. It was very difficult for me to to psych myself up to go to the airport to come here. It was. I kept saying, okay, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go. I psyched myself up so for a couple of days before I took that plane. But I did not. I'm not afraid of heights. I was gonna go. I was just busy doing other things, and I was just preoccupied with other things. I'm not afraid of heights, and I would have loved to film from there.
Did you think the buildings were inspiring or beautiful or anything like that, or how did you feel about the buildings?
I think that was magnificent architecture. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, you don't. There are tall buildings in South Africa, but not as tall as that. So, in architecturally speaking, yeah, they were the best in the world, and that's what I can say about those twin towers.
So tell me a little bit about September 11th for you. If you would also start by telling me what you had planned to do that day, what exactly you were doing when things happened, when you learned about what was happening.
Well, I was, it's funny because I was trying to find my way back to New York from a little town just outside Louisiana called Florence. I was trying to get myself back into New York, and I had gone there to help a couple of friends film a project, and along the way we disagreed about a lot of things, and I decided to come back and let them go do their project in Louisiana. So I was trying to find my way back into New York, and there was no bus, plane, or any way of getting back into New York. But I got a ride from a truck driver who lives in Brooklyn, who was driving from Florence to New York.
Now, when was this exactly?
It was on the day of the attack.
So start by saying, on September 11th, you were in you weren't in New York, right?
On September 11th, I was not in New York. I was in Florence, like I said, in Louisiana. And I was trying to find my way to New York.
So what was it like when you learned about things? Where were you down there? Like what were you doing that day? And
I was walking to a bus station. As I was walking to a bus station, there was this trucker who was driving in the opposite direction, and he popped his head out the window, and he said, "They hit the World Trade Center," he said. "They hit the World Trade Center." And I looked at him and I thought, what is this guy trying to tell me? At this point, I had not heard anything about the attack, but I had this guy keep saying, "They hit the World Trade Center, they hit the World Trade Center." And it was only when I got to the bus station that the attendant told me that there are no buses going out of Florence for the next 4 days because everything is being closed down. You can't get yourself to New York, sir, because the buses are not going there. So you better be ready to be in this town for 4 or 5 days. And I said, no, I got to get to New York. And he said, no, they hit the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. And there's no way you can go anywhere right now. And I said, I really have to get to New York because I need to get there. I have no money to book myself into a hotel. Where am I going to be, And I frantically tried to call a couple of people, and also the lines were jammed. There was no way I could reach anyone, either by phone, or there was no way I was going to get into a bus to come to New York. So I was loitering around, and I went to this filling station where there was a lot of trucks, and I was hoping that I would get a ride from there. And after having been there for about 4 or 5 hours, I was talking to a couple of people, like these truckers, and I was trying to find out if they are heading to New York, and none of them would give me a ride except for this guy, a Puerto Rican guy who lives in Brooklyn. And he said, well, man, you know what? I'm not allowed to do this, but you seem like a nice guy. I'll give you a ride, you know? And he said, but if you give me a little money for my food along the way, you know, it's going to be a long trip. It's going to be overnight. And, you know, you come in or what? And I said, yes. And I got into the truck. I remember this guy is a big fellow. I got into the truck, and he also got onto the other side. And as I eased myself into the truck, he grabbed me by the neck and he said, do you have a gun on you or not? And I said, no. And he said, do you have a weapon on you? And I said, yes, I have a knife. I carry a little pocket knife. I took the knife out. I said, yes, I have a knife. This is all I got. And this is a pocket knife. I am not intending to harm you. He said, you better not, because, you know, there are people here on the road who are against truckers, and they always want to steal radios or this thing or the other. So you better not be one of those. I said, no, I'm just trying to get to New York. He says, okay, buddy, let's go. And we drove to New York overnight, and I was in New York the next day. And
what time did you arrive? What was it like?
It was about 7 in the morning when I got into New York, and there were police everywhere, and for some reason New York just looked dusty, and I didn't know what to expect, because I knew that the World Trade Center was hit and the Pentagon was hit, but I thought, you know, it's just like a little bomb, or it's just a couple of planes sticking out of the buildings or something like that. But when I got here, the landscape looked different. The air was thick with dust, and it was just heavy with emotion. People were walking around with heavy faces. It looked like, and it felt like New York had come to a standstill for a minute. When I stepped out of the subway and I walked the streets and I saw all the cops, I thought, wow, you know, what's happened to this city? What's going on? And I got myself into the mood of the city as the day went by. And of course I was tired. I didn't sleep in my travel from Louisiana and with this trucker. So I went home and I rested a little bit. I just stayed out of the streets, because most of the streets were cordoned off, and there was you couldn't just walk anywhere. So I decided to stay out of that, and I went home, and I stayed indoors for the better part of the day.
Had you already known when you were down in Louisiana about the towers collapsing? You'd heard all the news?
Yes, but I didn't expect. I had heard that while I was in Louisiana. I heard that the towers were attacked. Some people flew planes into the towers, but I didn't expect them to have fallen to the ground. I mean, these are big towers we're talking about. And I couldn't imagine them all flattened down. So it was a surprise for me to get to New York and find the towers, you know, blown out like that.
Is it the kind of thing that you actually heard as you were, I'm imagining, during this long truck ride, you're listening to the news, since there's so much news at the time?
That's right.
Were you listening probably to the news, or were you not really hearing that much at that time? Because I'm just curious now if you would have heard from a distance that the towers had really been leveled, or had you only heard that there had been some sort of crumbling of the towers and you really didn't know the full extent of it?
I had known that the towers were, well, I knew that a couple of people flew planes into the towers. And in my imagination, I could not think what damage has been done to the towers. But on the trip, in the truck, the radio was on, but it wasn't so audible. I couldn't pick up everything because there was a lot of coverage and then there was a lot of opinion. People were talking about it. But what I got from the whole thing was that the whole city is devastated, and that about 4,000 or 5,000 people are presumed dead, and that gave me the magnitude of what could have possibly happened. But hearing it from that distance, you don't imagine that the towers are flattened down. I still thought that I would get to New York and I'd still see half the tower still standing and all that. But there had been this trucker guy had been trying to get somebody from New York over his radio to tell him what's going on. And of course the radio did not work, the two-way radio did not work, and the radio reception wasn't so good. And I learned a lot more about the collapsing of the towers from this guy more than from the radio. So he also did not know exactly what had happened, but he was speculating from what he's heard in the news that the towers are flattened down. But I refuse to believe that, because these towers were looming into the sky, and how do you one day imagine that they are all flat, they are flattened out, and there's nothing is left, and then there's only rubble there? That I could not believe. But when I got to New York and I saw the skyline, and I knew that the buildings had been toppled completely.
You wanted to get back to New York. Did you have any fears about coming back to the
No, I was anxious. I was anxious to come back to see for myself what has happened. I was really anxious to come back and see for myself what the skyline looks like. I was in a hurry to get to New York so I can see for myself, and so I can film as well, if I could.
So you had that idea in mind?
Yes, I had the idea in mind to come back and see what I can do, what I can pick up, what I can see, what my camera can pick up.
Would you have filmed, do you think, on the 11th if you were in town?
I think so. I think my curiosity would have driven me to go out and shoot.
So you feel like you go for the action? Do you go for, scenes of action in whatever extent, or was this different? Was this very different?
No, this is something different. This is, I like the action. I like to have a piece of the action every now and then. But this was very different for me. And the shock, the shock of seeing the streets, how dusty and abandoned the streets were, and the whole idea of not knowing whether it's going to happen again. I was waiting to see something like that happen again. I was waiting to see, I know this is crazy to think that, but if something like that happens, you're thinking, well, are they going to strike again? And if you're a filmmaker and you like the news, all you need to do is be on the ready. So I went home and I got myself ready to see if there was anything happening or if there was going to be any other thing taking place after that. So I think if I was here when the thing happened, I could have gone out to shoot. I could have gone out to see for myself what was going on. But I guess I would have been careful. I would have been very careful in terms of getting too close to any harm. But I would have gone out to shoot for sure.
So now walk me through how you did start to go out to shoot, and tell me what day we're on and when, like what time of day you started to go out.
So because I did not get enough information on my trip back from Louisiana, I stayed in. The following day I was in the apartment just looking at television and trying to hear the news and find out what happened. Was this an accident or what? And I think like everyone just wanted to know what was going on. So I really stayed in and got some newspapers and listened to the radio and watched newscasts on television. And only after I had an idea of what was taking place, then that informed my going out to film. So I got out the next day in the evening after having watched the news all day. I got out and I took my camera and I knew exactly what I was looking for, what I was gonna film. And one of the things I wanted to show was the mood of the city at the time. Like New York is known to be not a very sleepy town, and everybody is up, going about in every time of the day and night. So what I set out to do when I went out to film.
And which day are we? I just want to make sure I got it right.
This was the second day. This was the day after the incident.
The incident's Tuesday, so this is Wednesday?
Yeah, that's right.
September 12th.
So on September 12th, I went out looking for signs, looking for... Also, I could say that I was looking for comfort, looking for somebody to talk to, looking for another opinion. And I was also looking to see what New Yorkers are doing, dealing with this situation. I wanted to see how they are dealing with it, and I wanted to see how this incident has affected everyone. And it was pretty quiet, quieter than I had ever seen New York, and in my short experience here, and I got exactly that. I got relatively empty streets, relatively empty restaurants. Although there were a couple of people eating and doing what they want to do, but it wasn't as much as it usually is, And then I stumbled onto a night vigil, which also was an interesting aspect of my going out to shoot. And I saw New Yorkers getting together and trying to console each other. And also there was a lot of debates flying about what has happened, about a lot of things. I mean, and then I learned also that, there were a few views dominating this these discussions of the war, because at this point it had become evident to me that this is war. And from listening to people, I knew that this is war for sure. And there had been a couple of points of view about the war. And, you know, and I gathered that from listening to people and from filming, from looking at this thing through my viewfinder, I found that and from what I heard from people, that there is an inherent conflict between the Western rationalism and you know, when you look at America and you look at how the West operates, and you look at how the developing world works, you find that there is a conflict there for sure in the way these two entities work, and it transpired to me that this conflict can only be resolved by war. Looking at what is happening in the Middle East and what is happening in the US, and how the people in the Middle East view the US and its policies, its international policies, you find that a lot of people are angry about that, and therefore, you know, they are willing to give their lives to show that anger. And what I also learned was that as I'm walking around and I'm filming and I'm listening to these people, I found out that the Americans how do I phrase this? The culture of materialism has given rise to, in the developing world, has given rise to hatred that cannot be subdued by military war. I mean, it doesn't matter whether America is going to retaliate. They are not going to take away that hatred. They are not going to take away that passion and fire in these people to fight back and protect themselves against cultural imperialism, at least in their perception. This is how they look at the US, and they think that, okay, these guys are flooding us with their entertainment, with their films, with their culture, with their movies, with their materialism, and we don't want that. And the only way we're going to show that we don't want that is by blowing a couple of buildings. And this is what I learned as I was walking and I was filming, and I was listening to people debate about these things. These were a couple of the few views that came across for me, because I'm new here, and I was also looking for what the American public, what the New Yorkers are thinking about what has happened.
Now, how did you personally react as a South African, as a new New Yorker, as someone who loves certain things about New York,
That's
is
right.
fascinated by certain
That's right.
things about the US? You know, what was your primary personal reaction to everything that happened?
Well, I thought that this is war. That was the first thing that happened to me, that came into my mind, was this is war. And this is a visible sign of this war that's going on. And this war is in defense of some religion, is in defense of Islam. And this is going to be a long war. And I was scared a little bit because I did not know what was going to happen next, whether there's going to be another attack or not. And after having heard the news over and over again of how this happened and who is responsible, it took me back a couple of years ago in my country when everything was just, a lot of youth were ungovernable and they were willing to give their lives to fight an oppressive system. But this was, in my country, was direct. It was these guys against us. And they stood on the other end of the gun. And it was us on the other side. And one had to make a decision to defend their interests, their loved ones. And we did that in my country. But from the pressure that we got from the government, they forced us to do that. But the difference in my country with this incident is that our leaders gave their lives for that. They did not manipulate us to hijack planes and fly them into buildings. I mean, President Mandela, for instance, the former president, he went to prison. He was ready to give up his life for the cause. He did not manipulate young people to, go to Robben Island or be imprisoned or something like that. He himself, Stephen Biko, for instance, who was the stalwart of the Black consciousness movement, he died in the hands of the enemy. And these are the kinds of leaders that came out of our politics. And these are the kinds of leaders, as a South African, I have respect for, because they had given their lives to do it. And I kept thinking, why did Osama bin Laden get these guys to get into a plane, if he did? Why did he not hijack the plane himself? If he's such a great leader, if he's somebody that the youth should look up to, he should be the one that does it. He should be the one that goes and gets into a plane. He should be the one that was in the first plane that hit the World Trade Center. This is my point of view. I think that shows a little bit of cowardice. And this is the leader I cannot believe in. Then this is informed and is based on the politics of my country, where our leaders had given their lives to instigate some political awareness about what was happening in the country at the time.
Now, did you feel, when you saw emptiness and some form of, or a hint of devastation, you may not have gotten so close to ground zero to see actual devastation, but the mood was clear for everyone?
That's right.
Did that bring you back specifically to a time in your own country, in your own past there, things that you had seen or been around? Were there, things that you were reminded of, or?
There were many bombings in my country, but not even one of those I remember is as big as the World Trade Center. And what the amazing thing about the World Trade Center was that it was so big and there was so many people from all parts of the world. And that's how big it was. There was about I don't know how many people from England, how many people from South Africa, how many people from all parts of the world. And in my country, the casualties have always been local people. There's always been, you would expect a couple of Boers here, a couple of Afrikaners there, and that's what it was. And it was like a little restaurant here, a little restaurant over there, and a little farmhouse there. But it wasn't as big as the World Trade Center in terms of magnitude and in terms of the impact it's made on the New Yorkers themselves and the world. So it was slightly different, but it was reminiscent of that.
What were the highlights? You were at Union Square, right?
That's right.
Explain that and tell me, what stands out for you of what you shot, what you filmed there.
For me, what really stands out is the people, how the people came together, how the people of all walks of life decided to come together and deal with the situation in the best way they can. And that, for me, has been the amazing thing. That people could just get together in such a short space of time and comfort each other and console each other. And also, it was interesting for me to see the different point of views, like I've said, that people had different points of views at the time. People thought that, oh yeah, no, it's okay that the buildings have been blown away because, we have our own problems here. They should be looking at our problems. And I mean, you had sentimental stuff like that. And then you had people debating about whether it's right for the US to retaliate or not. And these people were talking passionately about it. And that was also important in the fact that we know the US as a country that's very, in the way that the American culture works, in the way that the media here works, is such that it insulates the ordinary American in the way that he or she does not know about what is happening in the world. And they also do not know what policies their government is applying in the world in their name. So you find that the American society is very insulated. But that day, people, for once, were beginning to look at what was going on in the world. Were beginning to find out why would these people from the Middle East do this kind of thing? What drives them to do it? And they were beginning to question. And in those questions, they were also trying to uproot information about the history of the relationship between America and the Middle East. And that was the highlight for me, to see, for once, ordinary Americans looking at the world and trying to find reasons of what could have happened, of what has happened and what should happen after that, whether the US should retaliate or what brings about so much hatred from these people that they will blow a building full of people. So it has been a turning point for an ordinary American citizen to want to be interested in what is happening in the world. So that was also a highlight, to realize that this incident, it took the World Trade Center for people to start looking out and trying to find answers from learning about other people's histories. So that was the highlight for me, to see that.
Can you set that scene for me a little bit? You know, tell me that where you were exactly, and tell me a little bit about the faces you remember, the expressions, the mood, the feeling. Set the scene a little, and what time it is, you know.
It must have been, I came across this night vigil. What's that park again?
Are we talking about Union Square?
Yeah. I came across this this night vigil at the Union Square. I was walking all over the place trying to film whatever I can get, the mood of the city. And then all of a sudden I got to the Union Square, and there was a lot of people waiting there. It must have been about 8:30 to 9 in the evening. And there was a lot of people, young people, old people, people of all colors. And I remember distinctly looking at the faces of the people that are there. There were people crying, there were people just depressed about the whole thing, there were people just like evidently hurt about what has taken place, and some of the people in the crowds had relatives in the World Trade Center. And you could see that people were touched by what was happening, and you could see that you had to look at their faces to know that finally something has struck home. Some people were perplexed about the whole idea. People were just looking in each other's eyes for a little warmth, for a little comfort, for some kind of support. And it was strange seeing that, seeing people who you could see that some of them didn't know each other, but they were willing to open their hearts up to comfort the next person. And that was also very encouraging for me, because I think my going out was also to look for that, because I was scared a little bit. I was looking for that. I was looking for something that I could work on, that I could use to think that it's okay to be in New York after all. I was looking for that, and I got that from the faces that I saw there. I got that feeling that, this is not the end of the world after all. It's cool to be in New York in the first place. I mean, I can't. This incident, as much as it's so big and it's really disturbed a lot of people, should not wear me down. If New Yorkers are taking it with such strength, I mean, I only could draw comfort from that. So that's what I saw when I got out there.
How many people approximately would you estimate were there? Was it a very large crowd? I mean, how?
It was a large crowd. It was a large crowd gathering there. It was a large crowd, and as the night went on, the crowd got bigger and bigger, and the debates just got bigger and bigger and more passionate, and there was people playing drums, and there was people dancing. As the night went on, the people just got into a certain groove, and that gave one the hope that, well, it's okay to be among these people. It's okay to be a New Yorker for a while.
Did you feel like you were a New Yorker in some respects?
Yes, after something like that happens, everybody that was in the city had one thing in common: fear, hope, and love and comfort for one another. So I felt part of New York at the time. I felt like I was part of it, because I was confused, I was scared, as everyone was. And that was the New York of the day. So I felt like a New Yorker then. I did.
And I'm going to look at my notes, because I did take notes when I watched your footage. Let's see, we have a few more minutes on this tape, and we might run a little bit over.
Okay.
So you, was there anything, I know you saw people with masks, I know you were, on the streets in addition to being in Union Square. Just before we move on, is there anything else about your footage specifically that you recall that you would like to sort of narrate or explain? The way you shot it, or anything in particular that strikes you, or how it affected you even?
It was, for me, it was really, it was heavy on me. It was really, because the mood there was, at first, it was very solemn, and you had all these candles, and people were just lighting all these candles, and also the energy of the candle light, and the people passing lights from one candle to the next, and as if they are passing their energies to each other, and in comfort, and I felt that, I mean, what better way to express how people feel in this time, that they're giving each other light in this time of darkness. I thought this is a great way of showing it. It's a little metaphorical the way I shot it and I saw it, but I thought that it's interesting to see people get together and do a simple thing such as lighting candles and getting comfort from it. And I thought that was a very strange and powerful thing to witness. And all these candles laying on the floor, and all these people sitting down, and you could see a little individual there, some individual there praying or in deep thought, or you could see somebody sitting there in deep meditation, and you see all this light and all these candles, and people just being very cautious with each other, very comforting, I thought that was great. I mean, I can't remember exactly what's in my tape as I'm speaking right now, but I remember just the whole general thing where people were just talking and debating about the issue, and all these candles, and people just crying and letting their frustration come out, and they came out to a park to do that, and I thought that was great. And I think that people were tired from watching the news all day, and they thought, well, I gotta go find out about, I gotta go out there and find somebody that can give me some hope, something to work with. And I saw that. I saw people coming out to get that. And I saw that happen.
I know we don't have very much more to cover, but a few more minutes, so I would be inclined, if it's okay, to just change tape and do that now, because
that's right.
Otherwise we'll get...
Well, it's getting hot in here.
I know, we need a little break. Now, I'm a little nervous. I see this yellow flashing. I honestly cannot, but you better not get it. Let me just move this around.
Okay, I'll tell you.
Is that a problem for us?
Yeah, that's a. You have to change your tape. No,
it's alerting you that
the tape is running out.
Well, that much I knew, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right.